Hi, Charles.
Hi, Gwyneth. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay, thank you. So I'd like to start by just asking you to say a bit about who you are and what is your experience of working with refugees and people from conflict zones.
Well, my experience actually starts even before birth because I'm from a migrant family. My mother's family are actually from not far away from Belarus, a place called Mogilev, which is about 50 kilometers east of Minsk. And my father was actually from Ukraine. It was Austria then. This is more than 100 years ago. A place called Karabchiv. So I grew up in a migrant environment in New York City. I then started working with groups for social change in my teens. When I worked for the environmental movement in New York City in the 1960s. And in terms of the environmental stuff, I was one of the first American activists for Greenpeace in 1970 and 71 and those times. I missed a year of university because of that. And I was in the peace movement at that time too, of course, the anti-Vietnam War movement. Then I went to medical school in the Netherlands, a place called Groningen. And I worked as a student assistant at the Department of Psychiatry. And after I graduated, I began to work with a joint Amnesty International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War group, which was working with asylum seekers and refugees in support of their asylum requests. And because Dutch physicians, for whatever reason, didn't want to really work with them, we were also doing diagnosis and treatment with those people. And then, even in the Netherlands, some volunteers working with them said that they were not getting enough support, not getting enough education and supervision. And so we began to do that. And that's how basically the things that I'm doing now started. And when the wars in the former Yugoslavia started in the early 90s, we got a lot of refugees from there, obviously, in the Netherlands. And we formed a working group which became the Coalition for Work with Psychotrauma and Peace. I came down here a couple of times. I'm in Vukovar in Croatia, which is one of the sites of the first battles of the Yugoslav wars. I came down here in 95. And when I came down, I thought I would be here for 6 weeks. And something like 27 years later, I'm still here. What we do basically is to educate people to help themselves. There is a huge problem of capacity to deal with psychological issues. The World Health Organization estimates, and there have been some articles in the medical journal, The Lancet, that have said that more than 90% of the people who should be getting psychological assistance aren't. And that applies particularly to war areas, to areas where people have been displaced, and that applies all over the world. And even when they get to destination countries like those in Western Europe, the psychological assistance simply isn't there. So what we do is we train people whom we call barefoot therapists or peer supporters. Ideally, people from within their own communities, but also well-willing volunteers who don't necessarily have previous training, and we teach them to be, basically to give first aid therapy, good conversations with people so that people can learn to cope with their psychological troubles and learn to survive in their new environments. It's very difficult. Yeah, there's a lot of stigma attached to getting psychological assistance. So it's better not to call it therapy sometimes, to call it other things. We work mostly online. We work, and the online, despite the pandemic and despite that sometimes it's nice to see people, the pandemic has made it, in certain sense, more acceptable. But the point is, this way we can reach a lot more people online than we would having to travel, and it costs us a lot less. And we could still establish pretty good relationships with people online. So,
and yeah, to clarify, all the work you do is for free, right? You rely on donations and you offer this out of, I don't know, out of love. So
yeah, we're totally involved in it. We're completely involved in it. We get a little burned out. I can't say we don't, but yeah, but we do it out of love and because we identify with these people. We identify very strongly, in fact. But it is all indeed, it doesn't cost anybody anything.
Yeah. So what I was wondering was if you could share maybe something that would be useful for people now who are taking in refugees who fled from Ukraine, because, you know, where I live, especially in the Czech Republic, a lot of people are opening their doors to refugees and saying, yes, come and live with me. And at the same time, I think people don't have a lot of understanding about, you know, what kind of psychological state are these people going to be in when they arrive? And how do we make sure, you know, that we're not unintentionally making things worse for them?
Okay, there are a couple of things. First, for the refugees themselves, and secondly, for the people who are caring for them. The first thing is that the most important thing is to let people talk, to let people get their feelings out. If you create an open atmosphere where people can say more or less anything, that's very important. Let them talk about their experiences, let them talk about their feelings. This is crucial because it's all inside. It builds up. It's like a volcano. The pressure builds up and up and up, and it has to get out. And what you can do is you can provide a vent. Let them say anything. Let them cry, let them scream. Just let them talk. That's the most important thing that you can do. And that's going to be very difficult for you to listen to. Very difficult. Make no mistake about it. It's a good idea to get a group of people together and for you to talk about it, for you to get your feelings out, because you will be traumatized by what they said. And so you have to get your feelings out about this. Now, another way you can do this, or other ways you can do this, and you can recommend this to people, is to write about it. I keep a more or less constant journal about my feelings. Other people who are creative draw. Other people make sculptures. Anything that is creative, people dance. And that's quite nice. Get some exercise. Don't stay in the house and sit around all the time. Also do something, and this is this is both for the refugees and for the people working with them. Do something that you like for a half hour a day, at least. Just go off by yourself and do it. For me, it's, and maybe you'll laugh, it's eating and having a bit of chocolate very late at night. That's me. And I walk. And walking and getting some exercise is a marvelous way of getting things out. Do get some exercise, get some air. This applies both to the refugees and to the people assisting. What else can you do? Yeah, to contact us, contact other people, form groups in your area. And well, we're pretty bunged up at the moment with groups, but we can always find some space, even if it's at 3 in the morning. If I have to stay up all night, I will. But do talk to somebody else. And another important thing in this is to set your boundaries. What can you listen to? What can't you listen to? What can you do? What can't you do? This is crucial. This really is crucial. Yeah.
I would also imagine, to ask yourself really honestly before you open your doors to somebody, right? Because it's very difficult. You never know what kind of state the person who comes to you might be in. And yeah.
Oh, I guarantee you will hear horror stories. And you have to be prepared. If you're in a difficult situation yourself, don't do it. It's better not to do it. Also, do not abandon somebody halfway in. If you're going to do it, make the commitment, make a long-term commitment on this. One, it is a trauma for it's an additional trauma for the refugee to be abandoned by someone and to say, well, you have to leave. That can lead to tragedies, additional tragedies. Stay in touch with refugee support groups. This is also very important. Figure out what the situation is. Don't try to do the legal stuff yourself. Find a lawyer who is working with it. And if you get into trouble psychologically or you don't know how to handle the situation, ask an expert. And as I say, worst comes to worst, ask us. We're open to it. I know by saying that I'm letting myself in for even more work than I already have, but.
Yeah, okay. I think we've got to try and make sure you're not completely overloaded with requests, but that
was the case before all of this. So yeah, it's one more thing isn't going to hurt too much.
Well, so maybe tell us really briefly about your Pragmatic Empowerment Training, right? Because that's a free manual in a lot of languages that people could download or watch.
Okay, we've only got the first course written, alas and alack. It's on the website, and that's www.CWWPP.org. And yeah, if you look up the Coalition for Work with Psychotrauma and Peace, you'll find it. There is a manual which tells you how to do it. We basically, PET, Pragmatic Empowerment Training, is based on the work of Carl Rogers, the psychologist, and it's basically very participant-centered. So Rogers says that people who have undergone something are the best experts on their situation. So basically, it's an open forum for people to talk about what they have gone through and how to work with other people. And we add to that. So people will first talk about it, and then we'll add stuff that they want to know. And it's based on what people want to know and, yeah, what their experience is. And each group is different. The groups are similar, obviously, but they're different. And the manual gives away a manual to this first course, which is on the client therapist relationship and self-care. Those are the most important topics that we think. That gives the manual gives gives some hints, some education on this, and gives some exercises that you can carry out. We're writing a communications course, but I make absolutely no promises as to when it will be finished. By the way, there are some videos on there, so you can follow it that way too.
I also wanted to ask, yeah, these are just some questions I had in my head around helping the refugees who turn up in our homes. You know, I think I remember understanding that between a traumatic incident and the development of post-traumatic stress disorder, there was a kind of window, right, in which if you have a certain kind of intervention, it might reduce the chances that it's going to build up into full-blown PTSD. Is that correct?
Okay, first of all, we don't talk about PTSD. We talk about post-traumatic stress reactions, plural. These are both psychological reactions and somatic reactions. And each person reacts in a different way. It's very individual. So some people will get very anxious, other people will get very depressed, and you may get both. And it depends on your education, your circumstances, your experience, and so on. There are very strong somatic reactions. Many people will get quite ill from this. And so you must treat it. You absolutely must treat it. The big thing is to get it out. The big thing is not to hold it inside. And yeah, some people react immediately. Some people take 50 years to react. They can hold it in that long. It's not a good idea because, as I said, people will get both psychologically and physically ill from this. So, yeah. And as we said before, and I want to stress this, if you are helping somebody, if you are providing a space, get help yourself. Don't do this alone. Very important.
And maybe now we can say a little bit about the idea that we've been discussing about bringing together some online meeting spaces.
Right. What we want to bring together a couple of different kinds of meeting spaces. First of all, we want to have a kind of a pyramid scheme where people will learn to be trainers of trainers. That's one thing. And we like to have refugees in that, and also people who are assisting refugees. That's one kind of group. Then there are group leaders and people who indeed take people into their homes. And not only take them into their homes, but who assist them in other ways. For example, lawyers. We found very early on in Holland that lawyers were asking us for help because they were getting highly traumatized from listening to all these stories. So we want to have people at those levels. And then just people expressing what they're feeling. So we hope that we're not, that, yeah, I love working with people and I don't say no, but we're just swamped with work in terms of that. So we really need people who are going to, that we're going to have a kind of a chain. a kind of a pyramid that people will teach other people how to do this.
Yeah, and to specify, we're not only talking about the current crisis in Ukraine, right? We're talking about all the wars and all the refugee crises.
Oh no, and unfortunately, we've seen a bit of racism in this.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing actually a lot of work, a fair amount of work in Africa. There are a lot of refugees coming from Afghanistan. In Pakistan and India, there are the Rohingyas. Lots and lots of people from Africa. Obviously, in the North American situation, there are people coming up from Central America and South America trying to get into the US. There's a big need in the US. And so the need is great everywhere. There are literally millions and millions of these people. And the more people we can train, the more people who are willing to work on these issues, the better. And we'll figure out a way of training people. We also need funding for this, obviously, but we need to survive. I need to be able to buy my chocolate and have my lunch, sitting quietly, I might add, meditating with listening to white noise. That's my way of doing things. And we need to pay our rent, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to get people into the community, people who are members of the community. This is another point, that it's much less stigmatizing for somebody to work with somebody from his or her own community than to have this big expert, this big psychologist, psychiatrist.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's why we also, right, would appreciate people who can translate the materials and can take what they learn into their own communities.
Exactly, exactly. If you notice the PET course that we mentioned a little earlier, it's in a lot of languages, and we've done that by putting out an appeal online. So anybody who's listening to this who wants to do translation and interpretation, it's very welcome. And anybody who wants to go into their community and do this work, we'll train you. So.
Thank you, Charles. Is there anything else you want to add before we finish?
I think we've hit the main points. I think we've gotten to the main points.
All right, great. Thank you.